We're going to wrap up this segment with Alan De La Torre and ask him about both what is it about Portland that has kept his heart here and where does he think Portland is going, but also he is someone who kind of grew up within the field of aging and how it's exploding in innovative ideas within the Portland area. But he's somebody who is working in a field that he knows that he will be involved for a half of a century. Alan, you're here for a lot of reasons, but one of the intriguing things is that you're the youngest person that I've seen in the last 10 years of being in the field in Portland. The youngest person is making waves, that you are deciding that this is a place where you can make a huge difference and it'll resonate or ripple to other places. You can use this as an example. Can you explain a little bit about how it feels from your perspective?
Well, coming on 13 years of actually being a student and being, I think I've been paid by Portland State University for almost 13 years now, which has been pretty interesting, mostly as a student until 2000. And then I took a position as faculty, research faculty. But at the time that I got here, I was in my early 20s.
Right.
And still, I remember actually to this day, long hair, skateboard everywhere that I was. So the first year I was at the Institute on Aging, I only had a space there. I worked upstairs and
you had a parking space for your skateboard?
It was a cubicle space, yeah. Parked my skateboard, parked my bag, and I didn't really work much with the Institute because Margaret Neal, who was my advisor, was on sabbatical. So I just didn't see her much. I talked about aging, but it wasn't a big part of what I was doing. I was taking urban planning courses at the time. So I remember in the summer, right around this time, close to 12 years ago, I cut my hair, I cleaned up, looked really nice for a job interview I had.
To surprise Margaret?
No, actually Margaret had no idea that I was even looking for a job at the time. And I passed by her office and she said, "Hey, wait a minute, who are you? What are you doing?" I said, "Hey Margaret, it's Alan." She said, "You look completely different." I said, "I'm going to an interview somewhere else." And she said, "Don't take a job until you come back and talk to me." And I came back, I thought I did well in the interview. And she said, I want you to work for me, doing work in gerontology. And so right then, I think I was probably 24-ish around that time, started working for Margaret. I've been working with her, for 12 years now. And it was really interesting because I, in some ways, have always felt like a charlatan, an imposter of sorts because...
Why?
Well, at 20-something, studying aging and getting up, especially as I got into past my comprehensive exams for my doctoral degree, where you're really seen as an expert in an area, to get up in front of an audience and to talk about issues of aging being
and
only...
you had never been there, right?
Yeah, a quarter of a century in, it's not a lot of time. It was difficult, and I think that in particular I had a little bit of nerves when it came to talking to older people about the work we had done. Got a little bit of pushback at different times, like, what do you know? And the answer is that as a scientist, as a researcher, I know things from an objective, empirical perspective. I know the literature. My research has found out certain things about the work we've done. So I've gained more confidence as I've gone on. Right. Getting your degree done helps a lot with that as well. But have found myself actually realizing now I've got time invested here, I've got experience, and not just with respect to Age Friendly, which we were with from the very beginning, but as a gerontologist in Portland and in Oregon, I've started to grow into my own being and to have something to contribute in some ways.
Right, and what I've seen is that you've gone from the total mindset of the one paper or the one project, and then you've moved, as I've seen it in recent years, to disability issues and Oregon healthcare issues. And can you go through the landscape of where you are that is not directly connected to the age-friendly cities?
Actually, there's a great story that is important to tell. 2009, I was teaching a class at PSU. It was a capstone course called Creating Livable Communities for an Aging Society. And I want to teach that again someday. So I had a student in my class come up to me after the class was done. His name's Joe Vanderveer. He's still a friend and advocate in the community. And Joe said, "Hey, there's this new commission on disability that's starting. You should apply." I said, "Joe, I'm a gerontologist. I don't study disability. There's a whole disability studies program, departments, people focus on this." And he's like, "That's not true. I just sat through a whole class, a whole course over the summer.
So he realized that you knew from the perspective of what he needed, and
Yeah.
but you didn't know it.
For instance, you're talking about sidewalks, right?
Okay.
Sidewalks are not just for a single user. There's a range of users from
Skateboarders.
skateboarders. Yeah, I tried to pass this off on one of my instructors once. I said, I'm going to develop a skateboard test for walkability. And I tried for about a week, and then I gave up.
But he got you to think, well, second think.
Yeah, so Joe had said, he said, look, I sat with you in this class, and you've got a lot of contributions to the field, and I think that what you need to do is take yourself out of a pure academic setting and to work in the community. And what's happened since then is not only have I broadened my interest from aging to aging, disability, all ages and all abilities, essentially, but I've figured out some of the things that occur outside of the academy that are really important for moving forward, not only policies, but knowledge. So we're trained to be objective experts as academicians. You're not trained how to navigate political systems. You're not trained how to advocate for certain things that you find as important. So figuring out that fine line between knowledge and translating that into practice has been a very important learning thing over the last 5 years.
So Joe's nudge allows you to then apply the science that's objective to real life situations.
Yeah, I'd say Joe nudged me. He knew I was heading that way,
Okay.
but he got me to think about this more broadly. And in the commission, the Portland Commission on Disabilities, I've been serving as a commissioner for 5 years now. That actually, almost 6 years. Yeah, it's interesting how quickly time goes. There are ways that we've learned how to be watchdogs in certain circumstances, shape policy in certain circumstances, and align groups in other ways to be impactful, right? How to affect policy or a process in some way.
To come up with a solution that the entire group agrees is the best of all.
I have a good example that
Okay.
I remember this pretty vividly. So we're working on the Portland Plan, which is Portland's 25-year vision for the city. And both the Institute on Aging and the Portland Commission on Disabilities had written these comments, testimony on the Portland Plan. And we sent those in, we went through the process. We were really excited because we had spent a lot of time, line by line edits, suggestions, policy recommendations. And we got to the final draft of the Portland Plan, and nothing was in there that we had suggested. And
From
we were thinking,
either of those two.
From either of those sides. And we kept thinking, like, how could this be? We were the ones who kept raising our hands saying, what about aging? What about disability?
You were in both
Yeah.
of those hands going up.
Both of those, yeah, exactly. Margaret, Neil and I had served on an advisory council or committee for the mayor, then doing the work just as public testimony was really important. And at the time, the Commission on Disability said, look, this is just unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let the city allow us to not have our voice heard. We continue to be advocates, but we continue to not see progress. So they devised this approach. They said, all of us will show up at this
This
hearing.
is a tactic that was going to be used
This was
to raise awareness.
it was
Okay,
really good.
Start
yeah.
over again. What happened?
So the chair of the Commission on Disabilities at the time said, we're going to show up in mass at the final testimony to the Planning and Sustainability Commission. All of us with the same gimmick, a paper sack in our bag with the holes cut out so we can see. When the speaker on behalf of aging or disability gets up, they're going to say the same thing. We remain an invisible community. And at that
We
time,
remain saying
an invisible
an
community.
invisible community.
Yeah,
okay?
because even though we had been doing so much work, none of our progress was borne out in this document, this revised document. So as that speaker was saying it, we would all have these paper sacks over our head.
Simple
Yeah.
but effective.
Simple but effective. And there was some media in the room, and there was definitely a response. That evening, we got an email from the Planning and Sustainability Commission saying, we want to meet with you immediately to discuss your recommendations, to see how we can integrate your suggestions into the final document. And from that, we had an insert that was put into the Portland Plan called Portland is a Place for All Generations.
Because of that tactic.
Because of the tactic.
I hope the email had something like, we hear you, we see you.
I have to look at the email again, but I think I don't really
What a
delete
great
emails.
story.
So.
But part of that is the empowerment of people to be first asked to be on a committee, to go line by line when they put that effort in.
Right.
To not give up, to say there's got to be one way that we can at least be heard or seen at that one point.
Right.
And the planning that goes into that really bonds the group together, that we're going to be working for generations to come at this point.
I think this ties really well into where we're heading as well, like how that push has brought awareness, I think, to the larger community.
For the disability, or with the
We
aging,
could call
or with both?
age-friendly, all ages, all abilities, making a better place to live.
Everyone with a challenge.
Well, so Portland is still, we've got this perspective that we're this young community here. And we're right to a certain extent in that the city of Portland is younger than the state, but we're aging very rapidly. And Portland has got this culture of being beard, weird, and biked.
Okay, say that again.
Right, beard, right? We were in Beervana, beer capital of the world. Weird, you see all these bumper stickers, keep Portland weird.
Right.
And this kind of place that supports cycling, bicycling. And that those things
okay.
are not always aligned well with aging or
What about
disability.
that phrase that this is where young people go to retire? Is that too contained?
So for those of you who've watched Portlandia, it's this, the television show on IFC. Their opening kind of song and dance essentially talks about Portland as being a place where young people come to retire. And we could think about that as young creatives. I think that Richard Florida has written a book on young creatives, and Portland is a place that attracts and retains 25 to 35-year-old college-educated migrants. With or without jobs, they come to Portland.
And you said the word retains.
Right.
Not attracted to a new career step to move to another city, but attracted to Portland, and then Portland itself is a retaining
We do a good job. Yeah, people want to live here, and a lot of
Okay.
people who've moved here will say that. This is anecdotal. I don't have the
Sure.
evidence here, but that this is a place that they want to be, that they found this from all
Continue
over
to
the
live
world.
here.
My wife and I both independently found Portland and have decided that we want to stay here, continue to live here. But just to get to your point
Sure.
about the Portland as a place where young people come to retire, the reality is it's a place where everybody is coming. So there was some research done at Portland State, Greg Schrock and Jason Djurdjevic, that showed that 40-plus college-educated migrants are coming to Portland at higher rates than any other of the largest 50 cities in the U.S. Right? We're
something
attracting
there.
and retaining older people. So to get that right, older people are coming to Portland to retire, which is interesting.
The dynamics of the potential for Portland when someone moves here who's a creative, innovation, they have that extra component of wanting to see a challenge as a challenge, not a barrier, and let's find a way to work together. If a person is here temporarily and then has a 5-year stepping stone to another location, they, in theory, would not be looking at themselves benefiting from something that's going to take a long time to develop, but they would see a different viewpoint. If I know I'm going to be here in 30 years, I want to make sure that this is good for my family, my kids. So it really is, if it's one of the top of the 50 cities, as you mentioned, then the potential for what you're doing, you're going to stay here for a while, right?
I hope to stay here for a while. My wife and I both love Portland. My family's coming up here.
I get that feel.
Yeah, I've looked at jobs. It's not easy as an academic to find a tenure track job where you were born, or not born, but kind of raised as an academic. Quite often schools will say, finish your doctoral program and then go on to other places. Sometimes people return, sometimes not. But what's been true about Portland is that I came here because of the place and have stayed because of the place. And so I've tried to find opportunities to continue working here without that long-term tenure track security. And I've actually applied for a tenure track position in my department. The position was cut before it was offered to anyone, unfortunately. Tough times from 2007 until just recently. And who knows, there might be tough times in the future as well. But I do know that there's no easy way to replace the aging network that you become a part of.
Sure.
Right, to know from PCC to Merrillhurst to Portland State, to working with Aging and People with Disabilities, the Oregon Gerontological Association, and all of the community partners from Elders in Action to AARP to the folks who are older themselves. You can't recreate that in a quick timeline.
Nor would you want to, because you're having something that's maturing and developing and bearing fruit for a long time to come. And to have someone as young as you are to be able to come up and understand the needs of an older generation, that's, I think, the mix that's almost robust enough so that we can predict nothing but good things will happen. And thank goodness we have people who are really creative and looking forward. The structure, the infrastructure of opportunities you're creating, the only difference between that and total success is educating the public as to what is being built for them and getting them to become part of the team that's going to then advance this.
That's key, I think. I really think getting people involved in their own destinies and their own processes are really important to making this work. And I can't tell you where I'm going to be in a few years' time, or if it'll be at Portland State working on projects that pertain to mental health, behavioral health issues, which I'm starting to work on, to really coordinating age-friendly, to working on housing things, which are my passion and substantive area of interest. But I have a feeling that I'll be around for a while, being both a thorn in sides when necessary, and being support cast when necessary as well.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Roger. Appreciate it.